So Alex, what is a HMO?
HMO is a rental property, but what it does is it stands for something which is called a house of multiple occupation. So different from a normal buy-to-let or somewhere where they just have one family or one person in a let, you'd have the equivalent of like 5 different households or 5 people that would be living in one property. So rather than having an investment for one set of people paying one rent, you'd have one property, but you could have 5 different people paying 5 lots of rent into that property.
Mm-hmm. And then do you think there's been an increase in people wanting to invest in HMOs?
At the minute, yes. There's been loads of changes to do with tax, not just stamp duty, but how taxes are viewed upon for income for landlords. And a big thing on that is trying to increase your cash flow. You can only push your rent so far in the market. Interest rates have gone up, which means it's hurting landlords in how much profit they're now making. So more people are trying to increase the amount that they can achieve per month. And it makes a lot more sense on that to do it by having 5 people or 4 people in a house, each paying a little bit of rent, which will be more than having one traditional house. So it's all about interest rates have gone up, so more people are trying to, if you like, negate that change, and they're trying to increase the amount of rental income they can get, and then from that is through multiple occupancy.
Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the benefits of having a HMO property investment?
So as I mentioned, the big thing is that you're going to get more money per month. So having something where you can, you might have a 5-bed here in Milton Keynes. In certain areas it might be £1,500 a month, £1,550 per month.
Mm-hmm.
Right, fantastic. That's for 5-bed. But you might get £600 per room. So you can see there's a lot bigger there for the cash flow. It's a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but it's a lot more achievable as well to add value to properties. So by taking the means of converting something from a standard house and converting it into a HMO, there's a more profitable way of you adding value to the asset rather than just buying something that's ready to rock and roll. I think that's why people are doing more, and the benefits are for not just the long term in the value that you can add to it, but also that you're going to be adding almost £800, £1,000 a month onto what you're expecting rental was.
And then what are some of the things to look out for if I was to want to buy a HMO?
So the first one is trying to identify the areas you want to buy. So HMOs have different legislation. So standard property, standard let is absolutely fine, but depending on the area and location, there's certain rules or laws. So something called Article 4, which is a directive that's given to local authorities. Won't go into too much, but it will restrict, it will mean you have to have planning permission to have a property of more than 3 occupants. So you'd have to go through a planning app on that, get the local authority to approve it. So if you are trying to do a HMO, a lot of people are looking outside of those areas. So there's loads of information online, or we can guide you where to look to do the directive. But if you're outside of that area, then ultimately you don't need planning permission, but you will need a license. So some people get confused or think I just need a license. It's very specific. There's a lot of hoops you've got to jump through depending on where you're buying. So having a license in place, and with all the, if you like, the horror stories you've seen online or at the minute, it's just making sure that you're having the property to a really good spec. You want to be a responsible landlord. You want to make sure that all the property's up to the relevant regulations for not just your protection, but your tenant's protection, and making sure that it's done right.
Yeah. And then what are my purchasing options if I was to purchase a HMO?
So there's 2, which is ultimately you're going to try and buy one that's already done. So you're trying to buy a property that is already configured in a way that would suit and be attractive to someone doing a multiple occupancy home. Also that has a license or the relevant planning permission, so it's a ready to go job. You buy it, you proceed through with it, and you can stick your tenants in there, or even have tenants that are already there paying the rent, you're just becoming the owner of it. The second one is to do your own, so that's to try and source a property, find it, buy it, and then convert it into a HMO. They're a little bit more difficult to find, obviously, because you've got to do a bit of work and you have to do the planning, but then that's where you add your profits. That's where your value increases for your investment. It allows you then to take money back out because you're adding the value on, and you have a lot more control. So where I mentioned a minute ago about doing things right, buying something, you're hoping it's done correctly, or you can do certain bits of investigation to ensure it, but if you're doing it yourself, you can make sure it's exactly how you want it, and you can set your tenant up to how you want them as well.
And then how would you just summarise HMOs as a property investment?
So they've always been around, they've been around for a long time, but the restrictions that landlords have had and the difficulties that they're still having to do with tax and to do with stamp duty, we're seeing more and more people move to that. It's a lot better option for investment if you're trying to increase your cash flow, if you're trying to generate more per month.
Yeah.
You can then use those profits to reinvest or to do other things. And the biggest thing about all of the HMOs is the investment value. So if you're trying to buy a single property, you're hoping for 5 or 6% yield. Everyone will read it online, or you'll see it on social media about your yields and your percentages, which are great to a point, but everyone wants those double figures, and you'd be very, very, very hard pushed to try and find something above 6 or 7% yield as a standard let.
Yeah.
And in anything with investing, if you can get 10% on something rather than 5%, you're going to. So ultimately, people are moving into that HMO space forward.
Yeah. And then lastly, how could Holbrook Capital Finance help me with investing in HMOs?
For all of it. So we give advice on areas if you're looking, or we've got access to maps to show you where the Article 4 restrictions are, where they're not. But also, as part of purchasing options, we can design, if you like, what you want to buy. So if you're trying to do your own and add value, be it from auction or run down or configure your own property, we're doing a lot of the minute of people buying them with bridging finance, allowing the conversion to take place, getting the planning position ready to then refinance and take the money off, gear your portfolio upwards, or even just a standard one. If you found one that's ready to go, or you only want to do 4 and you don't need the permissions, just the license, we can do a standard mortgage day one to just proceed on that as long as you apply for the license. But we'll guide you through all of that.
Yeah.